Your Highness, it is not something you have to apologize for. Rather, I should be the one to apologize. I have behaved indecently in front of His Highness. Ophelia truly felt sorry for Winfred for making a little girl tremble and apologizing so immaturely. But other than that, she also didn't have the confidence to maintain her composure in front of him. Wouldn't it be easier to clarify your feelings if you were alone? Your Highness. If you have anything else to say. Although the topic was carefully raised, it was clearly a request for a guest. It was a request that might have been a bit rude for the crown prince of a country. However, Winfred, who understood Ophelia's feelings, obediently accepted the order to insult her. Ah, then I say goodbye. I have already said goodbye. Thank you for your consideration, Your Highness. Ophelia stood up from her seat and knelt down. Winfred, who was about to stagger out of the reception hall, suddenly stopped as if an idea had occurred to her. Ah, that. I know Isla asked for it to be kept secret except from the Duke and Duchess, but it seems to be related to betrayal. Can I tell my father? As he asked hesitantly, Ophelia, who was still standing there with a gloomy expression, looked at him. Ah, of course you should tell His Majesty. However, Byron seems to have his sights set everywhere, so I think you should be careful about security, even in the palace. Even inside the Duke's house, which was believed to be quite secure, there were leaks. This meant that there was no one to trust. Winfred briefly thought, surely not, at his words, but nodded quickly. There's nothing wrong with being cautious, right? Upon returning to the palace, Winfred went straight to see her father. He must have received permission from the Duchess, since he needed to tell her the truth as soon as possible. The importance of the story was also important, but more than that, it was better to tell it as soon as possible to appease his father, who would get upset and ask, "Why have you hidden such an important story for so long? Don't they say it's better to take the hit first?" And Father Hiram's reaction was not very different from what Winfred expected. However, unlike his imagination, his expression was not one of disappointment, but one of bewilderment. So that's the story you kept secret for 3 seasons. He met Isla in early fall last year, and now it was spring. He seemed quite surprised to find out that his son had kept such a big secret from him for so long. And Winfred thought it would be better to feign anger and humor him. He felt an empty feeling as he wondered how long the consequences would last this time. I'm sorry, Father. Winfred murmured hoarsely. A twisted thought crossed his mind, how many people do I owe an apology to for this? But it was true that he had hidden a great truth from his father, even if it was at Isla's request. Whether he had heard his son's apology or not, Hiram sighed deeply and covered his face with his palms. His thoughts were complex. He did not know how to apologize to the Duke of Weishafen or how to make amends. Since childhood, he was used to Byron apologizing and making amends for the damage caused by him, but this was simply. Some might argue that the Duke's family should be held accountable for hiding such a serious matter from the Emperor, but Hiram felt it was natural to remain silent when his daughter's safety was at stake. He would have made the same decision if he had been in Roderick's place. This was something the royal family should apologize to the Duke's family for, and is in no way something he should blame them for. It wasn't because of any lingering kinship that I was dealing with these problems. He couldn't forgive the person who tried to kill his father. But does that mean that blood ties can be broken simply by cutting them? Morally, Hiram was also responsible for Byron's heinous actions. This could not be compensated with money or anything. Even if the girl was returned, there would be no way to reverse the elapsed time. Even if he could retrieve the child immediately, he would not be able to find out where he was hiding. He said Byron planned to use Isla to kill Roderick, so he would have to return her when the time came, but Hiram wondered if he could really wait until that day. The Emperor, who had been thinking for a long time with his face in his palms, finally looked up and noticed that his son was moving nervously as he looked at him. It seemed like he was worried that his father would get angry again this time, since he had always made fun of his son by pretending to be angry. Of course, I'd be lying if I said I wasn't upset. He seemed to have trusted and followed his fencing master more than his father, but he was shameless enough to keep this secret from Roderick. And he hadn't even been training fencing for long. But right now, Hiram had no time to tease his son. Just thinking about how he could undo his brother's terrible actions made his head spin. I'm not angry with you, so you don't have to be so cautious, Win. Excuse me, are you serious? Yeah. My head just hurts wondering what to do with this. Winfred seemed quite relieved at his father's words. Just knowing that he wouldn't have to deal with the consequences of his actions calmed him. Well, I heard that someone went to the Inselkov kingdom to look for Isla, so maybe they can find her soon. He kept his voice low as he whispered to his father, keeping an eye on his surroundings. Although they were talking in a room with a strict security spell that prevented eavesdropping, he seemed uneasy. Well, I don't know. How long will he stay in the Inselkov kingdom? The older brother I know, if it were him. I don't think he would waste this opportunity. Hiram spoke with a skeptical voice. An opportunity? Winfred cocked his head, taken aback by his father's incomprehensible words. The war with the Sikkim tribe. With all forces concentrated in the northwest, there are fewer people left to search for him, so I think he'll probably just say, "That's right," and rush back to the Empire. Hiram chuckled. It was a question Winfred didn't quite understand. Would Byron really make that decision? Although he was her uncle, she hadn't seen him since she was so young she barely remembered him. But since they were the words of his father, who had been as close to him as a brother throughout his life, it was quite believable. Winfred was a little afraid that that evil traitor would return to the Empire. Byron's ultimate goal was to ascend to the throne, and to do so, he would no doubt try to eliminate him as crown prince. And that was not all. He would try to destroy his father, his mother, and all his loved ones. But there was an emotion greater than that fear, joy at the prospect of Isla's return to the Empire of Pellis. I had no idea where she was or when I would see her again. The mere idea that he could be somewhere on this imperial land thrilled Winfred. Sister. Early one morning, Candace, who had just finished a pre-dawn video conference with the Council of Wizards and was about to fall asleep, was awakened by an unpleasant knock on the door of her inn. From the voice calling her big sister, it seemed to be the member of the Information Guild who had requested the search for Isla. Candace roughly tied her messy hair up with the rubber band on her wrist and opened the door with half-closed, sleepy eyes. She didn't even have time to wipe the mucus out of her eyes, so she looked like a mess. That? He felt that he had offended her, who had told him coldly, as if asking him to be brief because he was very sleepy, and he apologized with a frightened expression. I'm sorry. How dare I interrupt your peaceful sleep? He seemed about to kneel in the hallway of the inn and hit his head on the floor, so Candace quickly stopped him. Now that you apologize, tell me why you came. After speaking, he yawned with his mouth open. I only thought about quickly listening to what was happening and, if it wasn't that bad, going back to bed. But upon hearing the answer, Candace's dream completely vanished. His sleepy eyes, which were about to close, suddenly shone. I found the merchant ship you mentioned. What a merchant ship it is. Really? Yeah. The sailors were drunk and telling stories of encounters with pirates, so it must be true. The date is also more or less correct. Faced with the pleasant news, Candace hurried to get ready to go out. Although she was prepared, she only put on her usual thin white robe over it. And the man who saw her like this asked with an embarrassed expression, "Sister, are you really going to do that and leave?" Because? What is the problem? Candace asked with a radiant expression. It was a literal question, but to the man who dreaded it, it sounded like, "Are you dissatisfied?" He shook his head in despair, for he could not dissatisfy his terrifying older sister. "Oh no. I think you just need to wipe some of the blemishes off. Ah, the dirt in the eyes." Candace looked at the small mirror on the table and roughly brushed the dirt off with her finger. He even wiped the dust off his glasses in the process, and his appearance was no different from always. "Then let's go." "Yeah." At the man's energetic response, Candace left the inn and headed to the port.